this is where my head turned. I didn't even see when I looked at the odds that Jahmyr Gibbs was 10, but my first initial thought was, I truly, and I believe this like to my heart here, I think Jahmyr Gibbs has a better chance next year of competing for offensive player of the year than Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think that it's something like the next, not just next year, but like the next 4 or 5 years as he's on his rookie deal with this offense, that like Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be in that conversation year after year. Like if you look at his rookie year, 1,200 yards, fellas, total, only 230 touches and 11 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. And then I just pulled up Christian McCaffrey stats, 2,000 yards, which yes, it's 700 yards difference, but he had 340 touches and 21 touchdowns. Their yards per touch, Christian McCaffrey's 5.9 and Jahmyr Gibbs is 5.4. And it's like not far off at all. And there's going to come a point to where like either if it's this season or the next season to where Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get so good to where, yeah, you want to split touches up around the offense. You're going to have to give Jahmyr Gibbs the ball more. Like you're going to have to get him 300.
That'll be the focal point.
What? Yes. Like Christian McCaffrey, he gets 340 touches. They have George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings. You know, they have guys just like the Lions do. So there's going to come a point to where it's like, hey, Jahmyr Gibbs is just that good. He's like Christian. He could get to that Christian McCaffrey level. We need to get him 340 touches. It's the same thing with like a Saquon and these different guys. Like, yeah, you might be in a great offense. You're just so good. You need to get touches. I wouldn't be shocked if that ends up happening to where Gibbs starts getting more. And Jeff, I know you're going to say, well, you have David, you have this, you have that. But guess what? What do you say about when you have running backs on a rookie deal? Respectfully, run them to the ground. Okay. Run them to get everything out of them. Wow. That's what I see them doing with Jahmyr Gibbs. Now that his flip, that switch has been flipped, right? That flip, like they realized what he could do at the end of last year.
Let him know, Boone.
Like it was the same thing with Hutch. At the beginning of the year, struggled, and then towards the second half of the year, he just boom, Jahmyr Gibbs season, baby. Now they know what they have out of him. He's going to get way more than 230 touches next year. Way more.
Okay, I disagree. I think no, and I'll tell you why. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown has a better chance, to be honest with you, and for a couple different reasons. One, the terms of targets versus carries, I think St. Brown will have more opportunity because Jahmyr, again, shares a backfield. I'm not disagreeing. Jahmyr, again, is a great player, but you just got to look at the touches. Like he's not even the number one red zone. Really gets all the carries in the red zone. It's Dave Montgomery. So, you know, how are you going to win Offensive Player of the Year when he has 10 touchdowns like that and he's going to get a lion's share of the carries? No pun intended. But that's how I feel about it. Like, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown has a better chance. Although I get what you're saying about Jahmyr. I don't think Jahmyr will ever be Saquon in terms of, and Christian, in terms of carries. You don't want that. I don't want Jahmyr, especially when you have David, keyword, especially when you have David, to get 20, 25 carries a game, you know, including 7 or 5. I'd rather him stay healthy.
I'm with you, but if
because of them sharing a backfield, I just don't think like Christian McCaffrey and Saquon, they're not sharing backfields. Like those guys are getting 25, 30 carries. I mean, Saquon had 40 carries last year. He had a game where he had 40 carries. Do you think Jahmyr will ever get 40 carries in a game? No,
but to my point, it's like if you have a guy at that level, you want him to have the ball more. Like it's like having an NBA player that scores 35, like a Luka Doncic. And if you have him and you're just like, let's just not feed him the ball because we don't want him to get that many shots up. Like, no, you have a guy that's averaging almost the same amount of yards per touch as Christian McCaffrey. And I'm not just talking about like rushes, Jeff. I'm talking about like receptions and carries. So it's like, I don't want him to get 25 like rush attempts a game. Like, put that to 15, 17. But now you know you can get him out of the backfield as well and get him more catches out of the backfield, making plays like they do with Christian McCaffrey. Like, let him go out there and get more touches. That's going to elevate your offense that much more. It makes you that much better.
And real quick, if you want to, if you give him about 15, 17 carries, like you're upping his carries. Like I understand. I just don't think he'll ever get that usage. I don't think that's what the Lions want him to get because they want him to stay healthy. Like Christian McCaffrey, they have Elijah Mitchell. He doesn't even see the field, like rare. Like Christian McCaffrey is their offense in the run game, and he participates, of course, in the receiving game. But he had led the league in touchdown. I mean, we combined touchdowns. Like for Jahmyr, all I'm saying is this: not saying that Jahmyr will never win it, but I think he has a bigger hill to climb than St. Brown, just based on sharing a backfield. Like that's a tough especially with the red zone carries. I don't know.
I'm with Boone. Like if you're asking me, okay, this is a run first offense, and who's the best offensive player? Like who's the best offensive weapon they have? Even with what they could be, you say Jameson Williams has the potential to be a number 1 wide receiver. I still think Jahmyr Gibbs has the highest ceiling out of any weapon on this offense. And I think there will be a time where, to Booner's point, it's hard to keep him off the field. And that's not saying that they don't use David Montgomery, but even towards the end of the year, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery get a red zone touchdown, and the next drive was Jahmyr Gibbs getting a red zone touchdown. His vision, his speed, his ability to catch the ball in the backfield, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field, in my opinion. So I'm with Booner. I think, honestly, Jahmyr Gibbs, especially being a running back in this offense, I think he has because Amon-Ra is still going to have to compete for targets with Laporta, with J-Mo if he takes a step, if they draft a wide receiver. So where Jahmyr has to compete for carries, I do think, obviously, Amon-Ra will get the workload of the receiving game, but I think Jahmyr, especially later in the season, will get the workload of the carries.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I really don't think either of them have a chance, but if I was going to pick one, I would still pick St. Brown. I think just the chemistry between him and Goff and next year, I think that's going to even take a bigger leap. But I do understand what you guys are saying as far as Jahmyr Gibbs having the highest ceiling. He is probably the best player on our offense moving forward as far as skill set goes. And I think using the receiving game is only going to help his case. But like I said, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff have proved they're one of the best best QB wide receiver duos in the league. And I think that kind of takes the trump.
I mean, that's where I'm kind of at with it. Like I just don't, I'm curious how they use Jahmyr Gibbs. And again, I think he'll be more of like a 10 to 14 carries a game. Like they want to keep him again, because this is a team that you expect to make a deep playoff run and hopefully play in February. Like you want him to be healthy for that. Even though I joke about how I would use running backs, for Jahmyr, he's just not built. I don't think he's built that way. I don't think he's not built like Christian McCaffrey to take that wear and tear. I think
as you get farther, like I think like give him an off season in the NFL. He's gonna come back. He's good. Like he's gonna get you're gonna get built the right way. Like yeah, he was small. He's coming, like he was at Alabama. Like even to your point with the touchdowns things, like he didn't score the first 4 games, right? And then he got hurt. And then he didn't even score his first touchdown, I think, until like late October.
The Ravens.
Yes. And then he had a 14-game stretch then. The final 14 games, including the playoffs that he played, Jeff, he scored 14 touchdowns. He was averaging 1 touchdown a game, basically. That's like, if you do that in a full season, including playoffs, dude, you're over 20 touchdowns in a season. Like that's Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey had 20-something this year, like 22 or 23. So like you're on that level. It's not like don't give him the rock. Let's be careful with him. Like you weren't even that his rookie year. He played in 14 straight games coming off that injury and went out there and I'm pretty sure that 14-game stretch he had the most yards per carry for rush attempts. I'm pretty sure a touchdown a game. Like he was producing high-level Pro Bowl numbers. He was a Pro Bowler his rookie year. And you can only get better. A guy like him only gets better. And I get your point. Let's keep him healthy. Let's be smart about it. I just think when you have a guy like that on your team, it is more so dumb and not a good game plan to keep the ball out of his hands. To say like that's good for the defense. You're helping the defense out at that point. Like, no, you want to get the ball in his hand as much as possible. You have other weapons to be able to decoy and do different things with. But you have one of the best offensive weapons in the NFL now in Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yes.
He is one of the best, not just running backs, weapons in the NFL now. And I think that's a fact.
I agree, but I think we're kind of forgetting about how crucial David Montgomery was to this team and how good he was in the red zone. David Montgomery was a dog, and I think it gets overshadowed a lot because of how high of a ceiling Gibbs has, and he is a great player and whatnot. But David Montgomery was irreplaceable, and he took a lot of I don't know how to say this. It was like a lot of the disguise. It kept a lot of the defenses honest when he was in the lineup. So you can't overshadow what he meant to this team because he was unbelievable, man. Them two as a 1-2 punch is neither of them deserves credit. They deserve credit as one.
I'll ask you guys this real quick because I thought, and not that you guys are saying me and Gentry, obviously we disagree. It's a fun little, we disagree, but none of us are saying he will win it. I want to make that clear. But just the possibility between Amon-Ra and, of course, a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. I went back and looked at the running backs who have won Offensive Player of the Year. And it was obviously Christian McCaffrey, but take him out of it. The last one was Derrick Henry in 2020. And he had close to 2,000 yards, basically. But even before that, Todd Gurley, which I do think that's a decent, not physically, because Todd Gurley's like 6'1", 200 plus pounds, but he's like 225. But the year he had, I think he had like 1,300 yards rushing, something like that. What was this year?
He goes crazy through the air as well.
He had like 1,300 yards, but he had like 800 yards receiving. Okay. Like that, I can see, but also you got to take into account, I mean, Todd Gurley almost had 300 carries. That's a lot. And then you go before him, right? Before Todd Gurley, DeMarco Murray, who had almost 2,000 yards, Adrian Peterson, 2,000 yards, Chris Johnson in 2009, which, is a reason why he's called CJ2K. But yeah, he had 2,000 yards. Like, you get where I'm going. He's got to have I just don't know if they'll use him as much as you guys hope they will. And personally, I don't know if I want them to use him as much as you guys say. I want him to be healthy.
My thing is my whole thing, and I got to find who brought it up, but they're like the usage for Jahmyr Gibbs was perfect. And I think as a rookie, yes. And I think of looking at how he is injury wise, but then you actually start watching Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs, his vision and ability to avoid tackles and then let alone deliver hits on defenders. Jahmyr Gibbs is a player that is always falling forward. He always looks like he has eyes in the back of head avoiding defenders. So this is a player that, yes, he is small in stature. He's 5'9", 5'10", 5'11", but he runs and he plays like he's 6'2". And when you look at those players, a lot of the times, especially how he keeps his feet level, they don't get injured that much. Now, I'm not saying Jahmyr Gibbs is not going to get hurt, but I think David Montgomery, to your point, Gentry, is absolutely an essential part of this offense because he takes a lot of the blows from Jahmyr Gibbs. But when Jahmyr Gibbs, who led the NFL in rushes of 20-plus yards or more, that's just a player that sometimes it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what scheme you have because even if the gap is that big, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to find a way to get through and get a 25-yard rush out of it. So it's one of those things where it's like David Montgomery will still be a factor. I think so. He'll probably still have, what did they both have, around 1,000 yards this year? Yeah. I think Jahmyr Gibbs will probably have like 1,300 and David Montgomery 600-700. But I do think Jahmyr takes a step. And I'm not so much worried about the workload thing just because if you look at his play style, and that's why I think if there were to be a guy, so it'd be closer between him and Amon-Ra, it's Jahmyr Gibbs. Just simply he's the better football player. And again, it's not a knock against Amon-Ra. He's a top 5 wide receiver. But Jahmyr Gibbs, I think there's a possible conversation one day where Jahmyr Gibbs is the best running back in the NFL.
It's just so hard to me when you have a guy at that level who, to me, Jahmyr Gibbs, at his best now, we've seen it down the stretch in the playoffs at the end of the season. He's a top 5 running back and weapon in the NFL. Now, I get the point. You have David Montgomery. You have this. You have Amon-Ra. You have Sam Laporta. You still, you're going to have to move the ball. You're going to have to do that. And obviously, he's not going to go out there and get Christian McCaffrey carries because Christian McCaffrey is I think the weapons we have are better overall than what the 49ers have, in my opinion. And where Saquon's been, he hasn't been in a position where there's been weapons like Jahmyr Gibbs has around him. I just think, okay, there has to find a way to be increase his usage percentage. You have to. It's a guy he is dangerous with the ball in his hands, and they slowly got it to him last year, and he started getting better and better. Now he's going into year 2. He's going to have a better offseason. I don't see how you take it away. I still think David Montgomery is going to have 800 to 1,000 rushing yards. I still think that's possible. He missed games last year and he was 9. He had 1,000, didn't he?
But that proves my point. How does he win Offensive Player of the Year when he get close to it if he has a running back who has 1,000 yards on his team? How does that?
It makes it that much more impressive. He had Jeff.
Todd Gurley didn't share a running back room.
How many games did Jahmyr Gibbs miss? 3?
No, I get that. I'm not saying you won't
be
productive.
So he missed 3 games, and he had 1,300. He basically had 1,300 all-purpose yards with another guy that had 1,000. So if he plays in every game, and say you take a little away from David Montgomery, say David Montgomery goes for 800 or 900, and you just give some more production to Jahmyr Gibbs, give him another 60, 70 carries on the year.
But that's not always like that. You get what I'm
saying? It is. You just adjust it a little, dude. You adjust.
I think he'll be take 200 from Montgomery, add it on to Jahmyr this year. Football, it's that.
Jeff,
it doesn't always apply
5 yards a touch. Give him another 50.
But that's going to go down. That's going to go down.
That's going to go down because more touches, Boone. You get what I'm saying?
I disagree. I disagree. I'm with you, Booner.
He already has
a year sample size at 5.
I'm with you, Booner, but up until that point, because of Jahmyr, which I think he is clearly going to be the better running back next year, he's going to take away David Montgomery possession or carries and production just because of the type of running back. He's an explosive running back. So I just, in one touch, he can take you 60 yards down the field. And that's taking away production from David Montgomery. And I'm with you. Like, I think Montgomery is still going to be a productive part of this offense. But I think there's definitely going to be maybe not a completely significant dip in production, but there's going to be a rise in Jahmyr and a dip in David. I think that's how it's got to be
800 yards. 800 yards.
I'd say that. I would say it's even a little bit more drastic than that. And it's not a knock against David. I just think Jahmyr is going to be the focal point of this Lions offense this year. That's why they drafted him at 12.
Yeah. And to be fair, like, I think the share as far as the carries go is pretty good. And I think maybe in certain scenarios you can give more to Gibbs, and then in certain scenarios you give more to Monty, like red zone scenarios. But like the big thing I think is getting Jahmyr involved in the pass game in like ways that actually benefit him, and not throwing screens at his feet towards the sideline, maybe like plays up the middle and like you actually hit him in the chest. But I think the carries are fine, and that will work itself out as far as the red zone goes. You feed Monty, and maybe in the middle of the field you give it more to Gibbs and he has more space to cook. But I think you got to find different ways to get Jahmyr Gibbs involved in the passing game. He's a weapon.